Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Michael Wald, the Blood Detective, and welcome today to this PowerPoint presentation I've entitled 10 Risky Foods and Safer Alternatives. And the reason I decided to do this podcast is it should be pretty self-evident. We have too much food-borne illness in the United States, and of course worldwide as well. And most people are completely oblivious to what they can do to mitigate their chances of getting ill. The other reason I decided to do this talk is because, particularly right now, at the time of this podcast, I have an influx of clients with food-borne illness, and their doctors don't seem to be questioning them about their foods. So let's get right into it. First, I'll begin by letting you know that I'm a doctor of chiropractic with a board certification in nutrition and master's degree in nutrition. I am a sports nutritionist, and I provide life coaching and acupuncture to my clients. And I have a medical diploma. I graduated medical school, but decided to not get an active medical license. So this information is for your education. It's not meant as a substitute for sound medical or health advice, so please use it wisely. So let's get into, first of all, what food poisoning is. Just a simple definition here so we're all on the same page. So food poisoning is an illness caused by consuming contaminated food and beverages containing harmful bacteria, viruses, parasites, and other toxins. And in terms of contamination and some alternative sources of foods that are very commonly contaminated, let's get into some of them. So first are deli meats, for example. So the risk of contamination from dairy meats is from listeria contamination in prepackaged or sliced meats. And listeria is very harmful to the gastrointestinal tract. People can end up in the hospital with it. It could even cause death in some cases. So you want to make sure that you cook the deli meats from a fresh source. Use organic turkey or organic chicken at home and slice it as needed, because the contamination sources are from the processing, the equipment used, cold storage environments as they produce the meat and store the meat, and post-cooking slicing in the machines. The machines themselves can become contaminated. And who would have thought that my next example here, cucumbers, could be a source of contamination? Well, any food, by the way, can be contaminated. It doesn't matter how healthy the food potentially is for you. If it's contaminated, it's no longer healthy for you. So the salmonella risk of contamination of cucumbers, particularly from field-grown produce, which is most of it. And the alternatives would be to peel the cucumbers, wash them very thoroughly, or choose greenhouse-grown varieties of cucumbers. Now, the source of the salmonella or other type of bacteria would be irrigation with contaminated water, feces from farm animals, or dirty handling equipment. So you can see that the production and the production processing of foods is a potentially hazardous situation. And then with raw milk and raw milk cheese, you run the risk of E. coli and salmonella. And you really want to make sure the milk is pasteurized. I know some people talk about the benefits of unpasteurized milk. There are some cases where that would be fine, but you're still going to be putting yourself at risk of food poisoning. And alternatives for the milk, of course, would be almond milk or oat milk. And that's pretty much that. In terms of soft cheeses, we run the risk of listeria again, and because these are high moisture cheeses, especially if they are imported, the risk of contamination is even higher. So as an alternative, you'd want to think of using pasteurized cheese varieties and store them properly. Now, the source of the contamination of these soft cheeses are the use of unpasteurized milk in making the cheeses, contamination during the cheese aging or storage process, which might take place in unsanitary conditions. And then there are eggs. So eggs, most people know, run the risk of salmonella poisoning in undercooked or raw eggs. So as an alternative to raw eggs, use pasteurized eggs or cooked eggs. Make sure that the yolk is firm and well cooked, because the source of the salmonella in eggs is the infection from hens that are laying the eggs, pathogens that are transmitted from the hen's ovaries directly into the eggs before the shell forms. How disgusting is that? And then there are onions, which you run the risk of E. coli contamination, particularly in bulk packaged or pre-sliced onions. So the alternatives to avoid that problem or to mitigate it, lower it, is to buy whole onions and chop them at home, store them in a dry, well-ventilated place, and then the sources of the E. coli is the contaminated field water used to process the onions. Manure used as fertilizer can actually contaminate the meat, or exposure to dirty surfaces during the shipping process. And even organic basil. It doesn't matter if it's organic. It doesn't mean it's not susceptible to infection. There is a risk of salmonella contamination in fresh herbs, not just basil, but all of the herbs that you can name. And the alternative would be to use dried basil for flavor or grow small batches of basil at your home. The source of the salmonella would be contaminated rinse water, manure-based fertilizers, and infected handlers with unwashed hands, which happens. And then cooked poultry and meats. So the risk is listeria in pre-cooked or packaged meats. The alternative here to reduce your risk of infection from these animal products would be to prepare fresh meats at home, avoid pre-cooked deli-style products. And the source of the listeria would be recontamination after cooking from unclean slicers, packaging surfaces, or refrigerated environments. And a few others you should know of would be leafy greens. The risk of E. coli is high from contaminated irrigation or handling. So alternatives to leafy greens would be to buy organic, wash them thoroughly, or grow your own greens if you can. And the source of the E. coli would be contaminated soil, runoff by nearby livestock, or unclean handling post-harvest of the leafy greens. And then there's raw carrots. They're actually recalled quite a bit in my recollection. There is a risk of E. coli from poor handling and packaging. The alternative would be to peel and wash the carrots before eating or slightly steaming them. Source of the E. coli would be from the contaminated soil with E. coli and animal feces, and poor hygiene during harvest and packaging. So those are just a few examples of how exposure to foods that are handled or mishandled can perpetuate all manner of disease. And again, some of you who have been sick from these foodborne sources have been sick for weeks or even months, and some of you haven't recovered, and it's years later. So I would encourage you to get your immune systems checked, measure inflammatory pathways, and use whatever natural methods or medical methods that you may need to get your immune system and your health back in shape. And I hope that you can keep in mind some of the ways in which that we've discussed handling these foods so that you can lower your risk of foodborne illness. So thank you very much for attending today, and I'll see you at the next presentation. Thank you.